listening to the Direct Impact Podcast, and today we are having a candid conversation with Mary Bartito. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back. She's like my regular and Gregory for our candid conversations, and I think they bring like an amazing perspective, and you always come with really good questions, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so today we are talking about how to hop off the struggle bus. So hop off the struggle bus. This is really important when we're talking about our Plan to Recover mini journal, because we capture every day in daily prompts when we do our daily check-in, we capture our daily struggle. So we want to really know what are our consistent negative habits, hurts, hang-ups, resentments, struggles. What are the things that dysregulate us, upset us? What are the things that force us to act outside of our integrity? I ask my clients this question a lot, which is, well, was that in your integrity? And they're like, oh no. Like, that's not what I woke up this morning and thought I was going to do. That was not the plan. That was not on the agenda. And so we know that people aren't regulated. We know they're not in their wise mind when they're participating in acting out behaviors or things that they don't want to engage in. If you ask them when they were regulated, like, is that a good idea? They'd say, no, it's a bad idea. Right? So we want to really focus and spend some time every single day in, yes, our victories, which are equally important, and our struggles. So what do you think? Like, what are your struggles? And like, how do you know, is there a struggle that you have had that you have hopped off of? Like, how have you hopped off the struggle bus?
I think recently, like, the struggle that I had was getting a little more active, trying to get more steps.
You mean physically?
Physically,
okay.
Yeah. It was like this seed that was in my mind but never was truly like planted. And then recently in one of my trips, like, we did mostly walking. And so we walked like 6 miles a day on this trip, and it felt so good.
What'd you notice?
To do that? I noticed, like, I didn't struggle as much, because I think and by that I mean, like, the stamina, not being able to go up and down the hills or like make it the 6 miles. Yes, my feet hurt, but energy wise, I was able to push through that, be able to make it. And so it's encouraged me, like, coming back to figure out how can I create that routine and incorporate that more into it. It's still hard because my idea is to go in the mornings for walks, but I am knowing now that I'm not a morning person.
I love that.
So here we are on that.
But that is so important. I love that you learned just by giving it some attention that AM is not going to happen.
Right.
And that's exactly, what I think we promote in our Plan to Recover mini journal, which is like, understand your routines. Understand when you have energy. I know we don't like ask these prompts or anything, but through the course of utilizing the journal, you're going to learn your chronotype. Like, when do I need to rest and digest? When do I need to sleep? When do I tend to click on cognitively and perform well? When in my routine can I work in more body movement? And when is like a really bad time to try to do that, right? Like, it's important that we learn that and give ourselves grace. So, like, yes, we want to identify the struggle.
Right.
We also want to identify, like, what is preventing us from having the desired outcome. So is there a trigger associated? So we're looking at, like, am I getting dysregulated? Is there a trigger? Is my routine setting me up for failure? We're looking at all of that, and then you give yourself compassion. It's like, okay, well, like you just did. It's like, well, okay, the AM, I mean, probably wasn't the best idea. It was ideal.
Right.
In my head, in my vision, it was ideal, but it's not going to work for me. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's just so freaking important, guys. We have these ideals in our head, but through engaging on a daily basis, a journaling practice like ours or any bullet journaling practice, you can come to that space that says, sure, like, in my beautiful vision, that was the way it was going to look, but in reality, that does not work for me. That's really important. So, yeah.
I wonder, too, like, I guess our audience, how could they, identify their triggers? Like, what are some things that they may want to consider? Is it, like, a certain feeling, like emotions, like to identify those triggers to help them, slowly, okay, like, it's like me, like AM's not going to work. You know, what would be some steps to help them?
Yeah, yeah. So in that case, I think if you were really getting into the nitty gritty of what the trigger is, it's that, you know, you're dysregulated in the thought that I'm going to have to choose one thing over the other, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of steps would have to go into you not being dysregulated over that. Okay? But in a lot of different cases, like when we're prompted to look at our struggle in the Plan to Recover mini journal, when we're looking at the struggle, we then have an opportunity to start to notice the triggers. And the way we do it in here is to look at your most basic triggers, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, and stressed. Okay? Those are your main things. And I think it's so important because, like, I almost saw you starting to do it as like the what's wrong with me, or like if I just had more willpower, if I could just force myself. And it's like, no, that it really doesn't work like that. And beating ourselves up just pushes us further back into ourselves, takes us further away from our goals. So I think it's important to be like, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. But when I, you know, have certain stimuli around me, so if certain things are triggering me or upsetting me, or if internally these things are going on, I'm not going to accomplish my goal. And this is all about self-compassion. It's why we have it in that order. It's like, here's my struggle. Here is the culprit. This is what's dysregulating my nervous system. And then I give myself compassion because it's not a moral flaw.
Right.
It's not about willpower. It's about, oh, well, I was hungry. I was angry. I was lonely. I was tired. Oh, I was sick. I didn't even know I had that infection brewing inside of me. Right? But I started to get the sniffles. I started to feel a little tired. I needed to pivot that day. I needed to not be so hard on myself. I needed to change my routine, and I didn't. Therefore, I struggled. But this is that insight and self-awareness that is required on a daily basis as a practice to be like, oh, that's why.
Yeah. No, I think of like too, like when we're working with clients like that, like when I like that you bring up the triggers that we've listed in the journal, because I even ask my clients, I'm like, did you eat that day? Did you sleep? Like, what was going on? Because I think we don't recognize sometimes as people, because we keep emotion separate, physical needs separate, mental, you know, separate, whatever it is. And it's like, no, they're all intertwined. That, you know, that's why you get hangry, and then you couldn't, like, you know, remember what you needed to do and focus in the meeting. And then that goes into the other things that we do, like I do with clients, is like check the facts. You know, it felt really, really dysregulating, but does that intensity and emotion fit what was actually happening, you know?
Yeah. And I also like the opportunity to go internal, because yes, I mean, a lot of therapists, a lot of people in our field, yes, we're so traditionally, at least, bad about saying, well, what was happening? As though something had to be happening around you for something to upset or dysregulate you, right? And I think that really takes someone's power away. Because nothing has to happen circumstantially. Nothing has to happen outside of ourselves for us to get triggered and dysregulated, upset, and out of our integrity. It can be that, well, gosh, I wasn't noticing my hunger cues. I tend not to notice my hunger cues, and so I'm angry or hungry, and I'm not really noticing why, because it's not like my stomach's growling. It's not, you know, and you know, that's just very common, especially when you're fixated or focused or at work, right? You tend not to notice things like hunger cues or your emotional states, like, am I angry? Am I sad? You know, you might not notice that you're stressed or distressed, right? Because you're in the middle of doing or distracting. And so, again, I think that's why it's so important to not have the expectation that you notice it when you're in it.
Right.
But that's the beauty of journaling on a daily basis, because it's like, oh, when I reflect backwards, now I can see. I didn't go to the bathroom when I was supposed to go to the bathroom. I ignored my hunger cues. I'm not really having good, you know, interoception, right? Where I'm like, I know what's going on in my body, and I allow my body to communicate to me during the day. These are big things that you can reflect back on, but when you're in it, you can't.
Right. No.
And when someone asks you what's wrong, you have no idea
Right,
what's
no.
wrong. And so I think we do need to get away from being like, well, what happened? What
Yeah.
led to this? What was the trigger, like it's supposed to be outside of
Right.
you?
And that's what, like, I've noticed, like, at least this week, and I'm trying to incorporate more with clients, like, in that interoception work of,
Mhm.
like, even just asking what's comfortable, what feels uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and bringing that awareness. And, like, I broke it down for some of my clients. I'm like, okay, when do you start feeling hungry? When you actually eat, what does that feel like? Fullness.
Mhm.
And some of them, like, when we talk about uncomfortable and comfortable, they kind of have to sit there and, like, well, I'm feeling comfortable now. I'm like, yeah, but what are the words? What are we
Mhm.
noticing about
Mhm.
that? Is it like a soft sensation? Like, I think a client described pain as sharp. And I was like, oh, I like that description. That's a first for me.
But pain isn't always sharp, is
right,
it?
yeah.
Sometimes it's dull.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's lingering.
Mhm.
It's longer. It's not acute and sharp. But noticing that is, it's not something we often
We're not-
pause
we're-
long enough to do,
Yeah.
right? That's the beauty of group. It's the beauty of therapy. Is
Yeah.
the pause. It's the beauty of a journaling practice. Is that pause to be like, what is going on in here? Like, what is the struggle?
Right.
And if you can identify the struggle, you can get off the struggle bus. But that, I think, is why we have it as a daily prompt in the journal, is because first noticing it, knowing it, giving yourself grace for why that is happening, understanding what really are the triggers internally or externally, that will allow you to make pivots and changes in your daily routine, your habits, and your behaviors so that you can get off that struggle bus forever. You'll get on another one. That's okay. That's why we're human. Like, but the bus gets smaller.
So the buses are always running at the station.
That's
apparently.
right. But they get smaller, and the negative consequences that come with that behavior get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's the beauty of a daily practice of like engaging in this and being like, all right, these are my struggles. These are the things that I really want to pay attention to and address. And I learned when I was really paying attention to my daily struggles, when I would get the most internally dysregulated was if I did not do my timed voids to go to the bathroom every hour or 2 hours. I would not notice what was going on inside of my bladder specifically or my body. And I would start to get hot. I would start to feel this heat rising, and then I would get dysregulated and irritable. And it was simply coming from not listening to my body. And I know realistically now that I've spent time paying attention to it that I can't. If I'm busy, if I'm engaged, if I'm working, if I'm fixated or focused, I'm not going to notice that. So I participate in timed voids. Even if I have to set reminders, I go and I do that so that I don't get triggered. So I'm off that struggle bus. I'm on another one. Right? But
yeah.
it takes that time of sitting in it and understanding it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, who would have thought, oh, I don't go to the bathroom, I get irritable. I mean, like, nobody would have thought that.
Right. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So a lot going on inside of us that we want to be mindful of and aware of, and a journaling practice is a great way to attune to your body, to attune to yourself mentally, emotionally, and physiologically. And the benefits of that are great. So anyway, thanks so much for being here with us today. And Mary, thank you as always.
Probably. Thank you.
All right. Bye for now.